Discovering the Law introduction. Welcome to Discovering the Law, an educational program for the community. Today, we have Suffolk County District Attorney Rachel Rollins, which I'm very proud to see again. DA Rollins, you and I know each other since we were baby attorneys.
That's right. That's right.
Congratulations, and everybody's very proud of everything you're doing for Suffolk County and the community.
Thank you so much.
DA Rollins, would you please talk to us about what made you interested in the law?
Sure. And first of all, Lucy, it is Rachel during this show for sure. But what got me interested in the law actually was in college. I was fortunate enough to receive an athletic scholarship and signed a 4-year contract with my college. And after my freshman year, we had a good season. I learned that the women's lacrosse team was going to be cut due to budget cuts. And, I didn't know a lawyer. I didn't have any in my family or any judges, but as the oldest of 5 children, I understood fairness. And I knew that I had signed a contract and they said they would pay for me to go to school for 4 years. And then they were taking away my sport, which is what I had to do in order to get the free college. And so, I was very proud of the school that they said, nope, we're cutting the team and we promise we'll pay you, even though there's not a team. But the team is gone. Mm-hmm. And then I realized, Lucy, just how unfair that was, because it was 3 women's teams that had lost our, handful of scholarships. We had all done well. And the men's football team that had not won games in the same percentages that we had didn't lose a single one of their 75 full athletic scholarships. And so we asked for a meeting with the athletic director. He was not interested. We got a lawyer and miraculously he became interested. And I saw immediately that lawyers change things. Our lawyer did not even have to file a lawsuit. It was under the threat of a Title IX lawsuit that we got all 3 women's teams reinstated. And I knew then the power of the law, right? Equity, equality, and standing up for what is right. And that's what lawyers, I think, have done. And it is a noble profession that I was really excited about at that time.
Rachel, you have just told us everything you love about it. What else do you feel you want to add to that love? And I see the passion coming through. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I think, that was my first personal interaction. I've also had loved ones, Lucy, that unfortunately siblings of mine that have cycled in and out of the criminal legal system. Some of them have had some of the best criminal defense attorneys I've ever seen. Others, other times they haven't. They've had really compassionate and thoughtful prosecutors that held them accountable, but not excessively. And then others that just didn't even look at them as a human being and looked at them as a number or just a cog in a wheel, or no different than any other defendant that they might be dealing with. And I did not like the sort of arbitrariness of that process. So I started thinking a lot about fairness and equity and equality and justice and what that definition was. And I have struggled with that a little bit throughout my legal career, but I'm really excited about where I am right now because I have the power and, quite frankly, the autonomy to make the changes that I believe are necessary to our criminal legal system.
And Rachel, what do you hate about the law?
So the law is stubborn. The law takes time to catch up with what the world is doing. And what you need is bold leadership. What you need is the Chief Justice Gantz's of the world, the Ruth Bader Ginsburg's of the world, the Sonia Sotomayor's of the world, who are going to speak truth to power, right? Whether it is detrimental to them personally or not. You need you need people like Attorney General Healy, who is going to file, lawsuits against a sitting president because that's the right thing to do, even if that sitting president then turns their attention on her, right? And that might not be ideal for her personally, but it is bold leadership like that. I hope it's me. It's being the first woman ever in this position in Suffolk County, dating back to 1806, 1807, when our office started, and the first woman of color ever in the history of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, right? And leading boldly for voices that have been intentionally ignored or silenced, quite frankly. And so what we aren't going to do is be legally right and morally wrong, because we've seen the law is wrong often, right? It is laws and policies that were in place regarding slavery. And even if we look, quite frankly, with respect to the Holocaust, when I was in Germany, I was fascinated to see how many policies there were in place, how many lawyers and government officials were instrumental in setting forth all of the horrific policies, procedures, and laws that resulted in the Holocaust happening. And so we need bold leaders to stand up and say, no, this is not right. This is not just. We need to be comfortable having uncomfortable conversations, and we need to be able to do the hard work of looking back to make sure we got it right. And if we didn't, doing the hard work of getting it right and undoing the wrong that was done.
Rachel, you have a lot of discretion in your role. So what is the role of you, District Attorney of Suffolk County?
My primary job is to keep Suffolk County safe on a hard stop. And everything I've tried to do as a candidate for this role, and certainly in the 2.5 years almost now, coming up on 2.5 years that I've had the privilege of being the elected District Attorney of Suffolk County, it's always with an eye toward how do I use my limited resources in the best possible way. So, Lucy, I have between 300 and 350 exceptional employees. I have 14 different work locations. We handle about 25 to 30,000 new cases every year. And I have a budget of $25 million. And so if I had infinite resources, there would be not a lot of discretion I'd have to use about what I was going to do with our time, right? Or our limited resources, because they wouldn't be limited. We'd be able to, if conservatives wanted us to, I wouldn't, but prosecute every single crime there is on the books, right? We know that even conservative DAs, even Newman Flanagan, right? Garrett Byrne, people well before Dan Conley and Ralph Martin, or in vice versa order, Ralph then Dan. They use their discretion all the time and chose not to prosecute certain things and to only prosecute other things and things like that. I choose right now to use my limited resources to focus on the violent, serious crimes that deeply impact communities throughout Suffolk County. And I choose to decline, divert, or dismiss some of the nonviolent, non-serious crimes that overwhelmingly, Lucy, it's people with mental health issues, a substance use disorder, food or housing insecurity, or homelessness. And it is not a get out of jail free card. It is simply that jail isn't the right answer for mental health issues. Jail isn't the right answer for substance use disorder. Those are public health crises. And just like they were public health crises, Lucy, back in the 80s and 90s when it was Black and Latinx people and it was heroin and crack cocaine and we were being thrown in jail and nobody cared. Now that we've seen the sort of whitening of the opioid crisis, now that we've seen the floodgates open and people that look like they could be the governor or the attorney general's niece, daughter, sister, cousin, brother, uncle, college roommate, we have compassion all of a sudden because it could impact that family. We needed compassion back in the 80s and 90s. I'm happy we've gotten there now, but we need to also root out that hypocrisy and talk about it, because until we do, certain communities are not going to trust law enforcement, because prior to me, there weren't people speaking about this in this role. So I see my role as being a truth teller and also being a voice for survivors and victims regarding decisions that we were making and having them at the table. So no, it is not me speaking for them. It is either me stepping out of the way and allowing them to speak like I have done for the legislature or in front of the parole board or things like that. But that's what I see my role as listening a lot more and then being really bold when it comes to doing things that I know are right.
Rachel, on that vein, I hear you often speak about data and how you use data in the criminal legal system. Why do you believe prosecutors need this data in the legal system?
So you can't change what you don't measure. And we have seen industries change profoundly, right? The hotel industry was disrupted by Airbnb. The taxi industry was disrupted by Uber and Lyft. I want to be that disruption for the criminal legal system. And it's not even me. There were people prior to me. There are people, Kim Fox in Chicago, Marilyn Mosby in Baltimore, Stephanie Morales in Virginia, Sherry Boston in Atlanta, Larry Krasner in Philadelphia, George Gascon, not only in San Francisco, but now in LA, and Chesa Boudin in San Francisco. So on and on and on. I want to be somebody that isn't afraid to test out our theories and adapt appropriately. And so what was great, Lucy, was immediately prior to taking office, I was approached by some data, some PhDs wanted to look at our data. And I said, let me get inaugurated first and then we can talk. And then 2 weeks after taking office, they came in and I had to sign something. And they asked specifically, can we please have unfettered access to all of your data? We are going to look at it and test some of your policies. We might go back, significantly before you were here, right? I was 2 weeks in the job, so I knew they weren't going to only look at 2 weeks of data. They ended up going back all the way to 2004 and analyzing over 67,000 cases. And what was fascinating, Lucy, is just, I look now and say, my God, I can't believe I signed. But I said, yeah, sure, of course you can. And then they said, all right, and you can't alter anything, right? When we come up with our findings, you can't edit it, which is very hard for me. But I said, like, okay. And then I sort of went on with my life, and not to say I forgot about them, but less than a few weeks ago, within the last month, they came out with their study that basically shows that when people come in contact with the criminal legal system for a nonviolent, non-serious offense, and we divert them or decline or don't tie them up in the system, they often don't recidivate. At a very high rate, they don't recidivate. As in, we don't see them again for the next 2 to 3 years. They hopefully have the fear of the arrest or the fear of the charge. The study didn't go into what the reason was. It was just the finding. I believe, and this is just my opinion, that was enough either to scare them straight or to say, I don't want to deal with this any longer, right? This is just a process that is not fruitful, not helpful, and, I don't want to have any oversight. So that would have been good enough in and of itself. But then the study went on to find that when we do choose to prosecute or move people forward in the system after their first offense of a nonviolent, non-serious crime, they do recidivate within the next 2 to 3 years at a significantly higher level than we would have imagined. So letting them out of the system, they don't come back. Pulling them into the system and arraigning them, they recidivate at like 60, 70, 75% for more nonviolent, non-serious crimes, or unfortunately even escalating to some other types of crimes. And so that was really telling that, like, my list of 15, which is what I ran on as a candidate, was we flipped the presumption of incarceration or prosecution to diversion, declination, and dismissal regarding 15 categories of nonviolent, non-serious crimes. The best part of the data, Lucy, is that overwhelmingly the majority of it was under the Conley administration. So he was declining and diverting a lot of these cases. He just didn't trust the public enough to tell them, right? I'm choosing to be transparent and letting you know, nope, we're not going to do that. And, you know, the last thing I'll say is we ended up diverting, declining, dismissing, I think, in 2018, which would have been my predecessor, maybe 42% of the cases on my list of 15. Of course, the list of 15 didn't exist then, but we're able to look back at the data and cull out what the 15 crimes are that I was looking at. That increased to about 55, 57% in my first year. So that was only a 15-point increase. But what it shows, Lucy, is for all the people that say I don't prosecute those crimes, 57% of the time we don't prosecute, but that means that 43% of the times we do. So it's discretionary, right? If it's Lucy Rivera and she's never touched the system before, we are likely going to just null pros or dismiss your case right out the bat. But if it's Rachel Rollins, and this is the third time I've done this low non-violent, non-serious crime in the last 3 months, well, diversion and declination isn't working for Rachel. So let's arraign her and get the judge involved and see if we can do some pre-trial work with her to see if she is a little more motivated now with the judge involved with respect to her oversight and whatever else. So it's just fascinating. And I think data should inform all the decisions we're making. You know, certainly it works with doctors. It works in the, other industries, medicine, health, all the things that we are dealing with, school, we collect data in education all the time. Why aren't we doing it in the criminal legal system where we have the power to take away your liberty and in some circumstances to take away your life?
Correct. And you did mention, Rachel, those difficult misdemeanors. In that vein, would you tell the public and let us all know what is the difference between a felony and a misdemeanor?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. Let's start a step even before, right? So I want the non-lawyers on the call to understand, sometimes you hear the word civil, sometimes you hear the word criminal. Easiest way to remember civil cases and criminal cases is with a civil case, we can stop you from doing something or we can take your money. You can't go to jail for a civil, allegedly a civil violation. That's the biggest difference. Criminal violations, not only can we stop you from doing something because we can take away your liberty, we can literally take you and put you in jail, or even prior to you being found guilty, depending on if we ask for bail or if we have what's called a dangerousness hearing, if it's a predicate offense that meets that 58A requirement of us finding you dangerous. So the difference is misdemeanors are usually, not always, but usually, and this is big categories of stuff, less violent, less serious, and can be handled in our municipal and district courts. So let's break that down, Lucy. In Suffolk County, we are the only place in Massachusetts that has a municipal court. It's called the Boston Municipal Court, and there are 8 divisions of the BMC. BMC Central, which is the one right next to where the Celtics play. Yeah. We have East Boston, we have South Boston, we have Brighton, we have West Roxbury, we have Roxbury, we have Dorchester, and there's one more. So Central, East, South, Charlestown. That's BMC. And then we have one district court, which is the Chelsea District Court. That sits alone and has its own, Judge Dolly is the chief of all the district courts. You don't need to know what the difference is between them, but there's one chief, Ronquillo, of all of the Boston municipal courts, but there are 8 different spaces you can go. And in Suffolk County, there's one district court called Chelsea District Court. Remember, Suffolk County is Boston, Chelsea, Winthrop, and Revere. What's interesting about Winthrop and Revere, they don't have their own courthouses. So any bad thing that happens in Revere where you have to go to court, you end up going to Chelsea. Anything bad that happens in Winthrop, you end up going to the East Boston division of the Boston Municipal Court. And usually those municipal and district court cases are misdemeanors, which we break down into, you can still go to jail for a misdemeanor. Usually you can't go to jail for more than 2.5 years. That's the easiest way to break it down. Felonies in Massachusetts, we have to present to a grand jury, which are 27 secret people, 23 or 27 or so, secret people that my job is to have assistant district attorneys present to them and say, have we met our burden? Can you please return an indictment for us so we can move forward? They're the gatekeeper into the superior courts. And there's one superior court in Suffolk County, which is right across the street from Boston City Hall. It's called Suffolk Superior Court. Yes. And right next door to it is the Massachusetts Appeals Court and the Supreme Judicial Court for our state, which are the 2 appellate courts that you go to when you don't like something that's happened in the municipal or district courts or in the superior courts. So that's a pretty good breakdown. The only other difference is most of the times, Lucy, for a misdemeanor, you're going to go to what's called the House of Corrections, which those are overseen by sheriffs, which are elected. Okay, so we have one House of Corrections in Suffolk County. Sheriff Tompkins is elected for a 6-year term. He runs the Suffolk County House of Corrections, which includes Nashua Street and South Bay. Yeah, South Bay, right? Yeah. And then he can house people pre-trial there, but he also can serve, you could serve your sentence somewhere if it's a misdemeanor for less than usually 2 years, 2.5 years. The other side of that, Lucy, is the Department of Corrections. That's MCI Concord, MCI, Norfolk, right? It's Sousa Baranowski, it's MCI Shirley, right? Those places, and that's run by the Secretary of EOPS, right? Executive Office of Public Safety and Security. That's Secretary Turco. It's not an elected position. Governor Baker gets to appoint that person. So I know it sounds confusing, but it is. But we work it out. And in Massachusetts, there's not a death penalty, but you can be found guilty and be sentenced to life without the possibility of parole, meaning you will die, sadly, in jail without ever being able to go in front of the parole board. So that's the breakdown: misdemeanors, felonies. It's a little bit complicated, but I want to make sure you guys understand all the different pieces of those things.
Thank you, Rachel. This is very helpful for our audience. But we also wanted to talk about the misdemeanors, how your office handles misdemeanors charges, but also about the academic research you alluded to, the academic research that recently released, that study that you talked to us about, looking into the impact of misdemeanor prosecutions in Suffolk County over the past 20 years. And tell us about the conclusions of the study and how your office is handling these.
Yeah, I mean, I think the study has been fascinating, but you don't have to be a lawyer to recognize the sort of misdemeanor murders that we've seen, right? So we have the trial of Derek Chauvin is happening as we speak. George Floyd was murdered over a misdemeanor. Handing over a counterfeit $20 bill is likely a misdemeanor in that state, number one. Number two, the police are responsible for protecting and serving, allegedly, and then also arresting. They don't prosecute, they don't adjudicate, and they don't sentence. But what Derek Chauvin did to George Floyd was, arrested, tried, convicted, sentenced, and executed him in, now we know, not 8 minutes and 46 seconds, over 9 minutes of putting his knee on his neck. And now his defense attorney is saying sometimes it was on his shoulder. But what's great is we have seen members of law enforcement, medical examiner staff, and others come forward in droves saying that is not true. Whether George Floyd had drugs in his system or not was not his cause of death, right? And, we even saw, Lucy, I think George Clooney made some very powerful statements of, well, Derek Chauvin, if you believe it was drugs that killed George Floyd, why don't we put you on the ground and put somebody's knee on your throat for 9 minutes and see if you live, right? So again, it is just deeply troubling that we are seeing misdemeanor murders, right? We see Sandra Bland, we see Eric Gardner in New York. We see just recently in the same police department that Derek Chauvin was a member of, a Black man recently pulled over for an air freshener blocking his mirror. That was the reason for the traffic stop. And he was shot to death by the police. So this is outrageous that we are stopped for frivolous, non-criminal nonsense by overwhelmingly, white police departments that are overwhelmingly killing Black and brown people, right? Or people with mental health issues, and or people that, should be issued a ticket, if that, and they are losing their lives. So, for me, I think the study shows in the simplest of forms, it isn't keeping us safe, right? When we touch people and put them in the system, it's not making them better. And then at the other end of the spectrum, in the world we're in right now, Lucy, people are losing their lives and there's no appellate process after somebody's been murdered, right? And what we see is just a systemic failure, because the same communities you and I are from, we pay our taxes. Our taxes supposedly pay for the police that over-police us. They pay for the DA's office that over-prosecutes us. They pay for the mayors that overwhelmingly don't fire the police officers that commit excessive force and harm, for the DAs that willfully look away and don't prosecute when those things happen. And then when the family finally gets a lawyer like Ben Crump or Lee Merritt and sues the city and the police department, the money that comes out to pay that judgment, after they've, of course, indemnified the police officer so he or she doesn't have to pay anything for their wrongdoing, comes from our tax dollars. So we are insulted over and over and over again in the process. We don't win because we don't get criminal convictions, and we don't win at times because qualified immunity precludes us from suing the very police officers that are engaged in the bad behavior. And then the unions step up and support police no matter what, right? Rather than looking at Derek Chauvin and saying, this is the worst of anything we've ever seen, and we denounce what he's doing, we see police unions standing up and saying, back the blue, and then wonder why there's tension between our communities and law enforcement. And I will end with, when there's tension and mistrust with law enforcement, that's why we get not guilties and verdicts. Because Lucy, you understand as a lawyer, when I bring a case forward, usually the police are my key witnesses, right? I'm calling police officers when I'm charging people with murder because they're the ones that did the investigation. If my jury doesn't trust the police, they're likely not going to convict this individual, and that doesn't help my victims or survivors of crime. So everything is connected. We have to work really hard to hold ourselves, my office included, responsible when we engage in wrongdoing, and we have to be honest when we are flawed or make mistakes.
Dear Rollins, Rachel, we have 2 minutes before we wrap it up. So let us know, what do you what's your advice for lawyers or for young lawyers or those law students aspiring attorneys?
So my advice is, find what you're passionate about. And, I was fortunate enough to go to a great law school at Northeastern University School of Law. And then I did go to Georgetown University Law Center as well to get a master's in law. But I was able to do some awesome co-ops and see what I loved and, dip my toe in a little bit to see what I wanted to be when I grew up. I have had a long path, Lucy, as you know, to having some really interesting and different jobs. And those have really helped me have I hope, balanced view of the world, right? And I have been a prosecutor, I've been a criminal defense attorney, I have acted in a quasi-judicial role in some of my federal positions younger in my legal career. I've served on the Judicial Nominating Commission, I've clerked, all of those experiences make me, I hope, a much better lawyer and a much better leader. I would encourage them to do as many things as they can that they find interesting, but also always be involved in what's happening, because I think we are in a moment right now. This is our civil rights movement. You have to get involved.
DA Rollins, Suffolk County District Attorney Rollins, it was a pleasure to see you again. We're all very proud of you. You're a mentor for so many and an example. And progressive prosecutions is an amazing.
Thank you, Lucy.
Acabo de terminar la entrevista, estuvo buenísima. Hi, Ashley. Everything good? Oh, okay. Okay. So, yeah, thank you so much for your work. Thank you. I appreciate your time. And did it come okay? Awesome. Thank you so much. I will schedule the next one on Tuesday or Wednesday between those times. And I wonder if you would share with us the link so I can send it to Rachel Rollins and they can give us some, give the studio some publicity. We were here at BNN, your hard work. You want me to? I think I should probably recognize you next time we do an episode. I should be like, thanks to Ashley, our producer. What do you think? All right. Yeah, we'll do that next time. If you feel like there is something we should add at the show, like say discovering the law is an educational, all I said was this educational program, but if there's anything else, you let us know. You're our, our manager, so let us know. Very good, Ashley. So thank you, honey. Love you.